A human warrior risked his life to save the child of an alien vampire queen, but the reward was worth it. Cal was pretty sure this counted as a very stupid way to die. He crouched behind a chunk of blackened metal that used to be a drone, a smoking, slightly twitching thing that had nearly decapitated him 10 seconds ago, and peeked around the edge. A plasma bolt hissed past his face and vaporized the air 3 centimeters from his left eyebrow. He ducked back and muttered, "Okay, so, not a warm welcome." Grease's voice crackled through his earpiece, overly calm, which was usually a bad sign. "Statistically, you're doing better than expected. Most intruders don't make it past the perimeter moat. Did you see the teeth on those things? Elegant. Focus, Grease. Where's the entrance?" "I'd tell you, but I don't want to ruin the suspense." "Grease." "Fine. 2 meters northeast. You'll need to disable the cryo-runes. And, don't step on the red moss." Kyle glanced down. He was standing on red moss. There was a soft slurp, and then the ground beneath him bubbled with ominous intent. Kyle jumped back just as a cluster of spiked tendrils erupted from the moss, each one snapping at the air like hangry noodles. "I hate this planet," he gasped, rolling behind another wrecked drone. "Technically, it's not a planet. The Ravkan fortress is constructed on a drifting fragment of a collapsed moon, held together by artificial gravity, blood iron, and what I can only assume is passive-aggressive architecture." Kyle wiped a streak of grime off his brow, eyes narrowing at the towering fortress ahead. It didn't just loom, it judged. Every tower twisted upward like it was trying to stab the sky. The walls pulsed faintly as if alive. He wasn't sure if they were, but after the moss, he wasn't ruling anything out. He took a breath, exhaled slowly, and bolted. Plasma bolts rained behind him, slamming into the ground, the walls, and once, a poor, unsuspecting statue of what looked like a 3-eyed goat with wings. Cal reached the doorway and slammed a small device onto the cryo-rune plate. It buzzed, sparked, then let out a pathetic beep and died. He slapped it. The door remained sealed. Grease offered, "Did you try saying please?" Kyle drew one of his plasma blades and shoved it into the rune panel. The energy hissed and fizzled, and then, with a reluctant groan, the door split open. Cold air spilled out, carrying the faint metallic scent of old blood and bad decisions. "Inside," he muttered, stepping through. The corridor was narrow and dimly lit, illuminated by veins of glowing red stone that pulsed with a rhythm disturbingly similar to a heartbeat. The walls were etched with alien script, Ravkan symbols that seemed to twitch if you stared too long. Cal kept moving, his footsteps echoing against the obsidian floor. His HUD pinged as Grease synced with the fortress's systems. "Got eyes inside. Good news. No life forms immediately ahead. Bad news, there's a sentient security system that's already insulted your fashion sense." Cal raised an eyebrow. What did it say? Quote, "Target wearing outdated tactical armor. Probability of success, laughable." Ouch! He turned a corner and nearly walked face first into a laser web. A delicate grid of violet lines hovered midair, humming softly. He squinted. "Is this decorative or lethal?" Grease didn't answer. "Grease! I mean, it looks nice." Cal growled, dropped to the floor, and rolled under the web, narrowly avoiding an impromptu laser facial. He sprang up and kept running. Time twisted in this place. It felt like hours had passed since he breached the gate, but his chrono said 23 minutes. The air got colder the deeper he went, and the corridors became less fortress, more cathedral. Arched ceilings, murals of winged figures in battle, and floating orbs that whispered in a language he was fairly certain once made someone's brain explode. Finally, he reached the chamber, the one from his dreams. It was circular, lit from above by a shaft of red light that glowed like sunset bleeding through a wound. In the center hovered a containment field, shimmering and silent. Inside it, curled in sleep, was the child, Virelia. She looked barely 7, pale, almost translucent skin, hair like liquid silver. Her ears were long, too long for a human, but graceful. Her breathing was slow and measured. Around her neck, a small crystal pulsed in sync with the fortress's rhythm. Kyle took a step forward. The containment field blinked to life. A voice spoke, not through speakers but in his skull. Intruder. Access denied. Termination in progress. Kyle groaned. Grease, now would be a great time for a miracle. Oh, you mean like this? A click echoed in his ear. The containment field glitched, twitched, flickered, then dropped. Virelia stirred, her eyes opened, pure silver, no pupils, just endless shine. She stared at him without fear. You came, she said as if she'd been waiting. I think so, Kyle replied, baffled. She reached for him. He hesitated. Something rumbled behind him. The wall exploded. Kyle turned just in time to see a Ravkan guardian burst into the room. It was massive, part bat, part machine, part unholy kitchen appliance. Its jaws split open vertically and horizontally, revealing rows of obsidian teeth. It roared. Virelia giggled. Kyle sighed. Of course, I finally meet the dream kid and immediately get introduced to the welcoming committee. He yanked both blades free and stood in front of her. Stay behind me, kid. The beast lunged. Kyle dodged, slicing through one of its tendrils. Sparks flew. It retaliated with a screech that shattered a nearby pillar. Kyle ducked behind the remains, turned to Virelia and shouted, Do you have any weird powers? Psychic laser eyes? Spontaneous teleportation? Interpretive dance that causes explosions? She blinked. I can hum really loud? Not helping. He dived forward, slashing at the guardian's legs. It stumbled. Virelia hummed, loudly. The air around her shimmered. The guardian paused mid-lunge and twitched, confused. Kyle used the opening to stab both blades into its side. The thing shrieked, convulsed, and collapsed into a pile of twitching metal and spite. Kyle, panting, turned back to her. I take it back. That hum was terrifying. She smiled and held out her arms. Kyle scooped her up. Sirens wailed. Time to go, he muttered. He bolted down the corridor, child in arms, heart pounding, alarm screaming. Behind him, the shadows coalesced into a shape, and far above, in a throne of black stone and starlight, the queen opened her eyes. Kale sprinted through the fortress corridors with the alien child clutched tightly to his chest, her silver hair whipping in the air behind them like a banner announcing, Please shoot at us now. Every few steps, she let out a delighted squeal, which he tried to interpret as joy rather than a prelude to another psychic humming episode. I thought you said this place didn't have that many security systems. Kale panted into his earpiece as a section of the ceiling tried to drop a row of spikes on them. Grease's voice buzzed back. Correction, I said there were statistically fewer active systems during lunar alignment. Unfortunately, someone shifted the moon. Who shifts a moon? You'd be surprised how flexible celestial mechanics are when you've got a grudging gravity tech. Kale skidded around a corner, nearly colliding with a hovering surveillance orb that screamed in a pitch only dogs or sentient bat vampire warlords could hear. He sliced it in half before it could record anything, and it spun off into sparks with what he swore sounded like a passive-aggressive sigh. Virelia tugged at his collar. You smell like old socks and terror. That's not inaccurate, Kyle muttered, switching direction as a panel in the wall opened to reveal a set of extendable razor arms. Also, charming. Can I press a button? What? No, absolutely. She pressed a button on his chest plate. A hatch opened on his belt, releasing a small puff of purple gas that smelled like burnt cinnamon. He skidded to a halt. That was my emergency snack compartment, Virelia giggled. You keep snacks in your armor? I'm a professional, he said with a straight face, then spun around to decapitate a mechanical centipede trying to gnaw on his boot. Professionals are always prepared for low blood sugar. They burst through a set of doors that led into a vast chamber filled with floating platforms, each rotating slowly through the air in a pattern that looked like it had been designed by someone with a vendetta against physics. The path to the hangar was straight through, but only if you could do cartwheels while juggling explosives in zero gravity. Grease piped up, Chipper. Welcome to the transit chamber. You'll need to jump from platform to platform. Timing is everything. Also, some of them are illusions. Good luck. Grease, yes? I will remove your voice chip with a spoon. I'd like to see you try. I have backups hidden in your socks. Kyle muttered something rude and stepped onto the nearest platform. It held. He took another step. This one shimmered and vanished beneath his boot. He fell with an undignified yelp, grabbing the edge of the real platform with one hand while holding Virelia aloft with the other. She laughed again, completely unbothered. "This is fun. You need a better definition of fun." It took 10 agonizing minutes, 3 bruised ribs, and 1 humiliating slip that ended with Kyle hanging upside down from a handrail to finally cross the chamber. He landed hard on the final platform, Virelia still perched on his shoulder like a tiny royal gremlin, and hit the access panel for the next door. The door didn't open. Kyle stared at it. It stared back. "I'm sensing a theme," he said flatly. The panel blinked and spoke in a bored, aristocratic voice. "Identify yourself." Kyle rolled his eyes. "Kyle Ardron, human, very tired. Authorization denied. Come on. You do not possess retinal clearance, nor does your..." The panel paused, considering the child. "Small silver creature." "Hey," Virelia said indignantly, "I'm a princess." There was a long pause. "Processing confirmed. Clearance granted." The door hissed open. Kale looked down at her. "You couldn't have led with that? You didn't ask." "I didn't think I had to ask if you were royalty. You were in a cage." "I was grounded," she replied solemnly. "For starting a gravity storm in the East Wing?" Kale blinked. "Wait, that was you." "It was Tuesday. I was bored." The corridor head finally shifted from bone and blood aesthetics to the more comforting chaos of a ship hangar. Mechanical arms suspended from the ceiling, coolant vapor hissing from cracked vents, and a half-dozen Ravkin guards turning toward them with surprise and plasma rifles. Kyle sighed. Well, it was a nice run. Then something unexpected happened. The guards didn't shoot. They stared at Virelia. One of them, a tall female with obsidian armor and a crest of horns, stepped forward and dropped to one knee. "Your Highness, you are safe." Cal narrowed his eyes. "Safe? Aren't you here to kill us?" The guard looked at him like he'd offered her a soggy sandwich. "Kill? We received no such order. We were told to await further command." "From who?" She tilted her head. "The Queen. She has not spoken since the stasis field collapsed. She remains in the Hall of Stars, watching." Virelia's face turned serious, the weight of ancient knowledge settling over her young features. "Mother is listening." Kale tried to figure out how that was somehow worse than her being actively enraged. "All right," he said. "So here's the plan. We get to my ship. We leave. No more corridors, no more traps, no more sentient moss, just space, snacks and quiet." Grease's voice chirped. "About that," Kyle tensed. "Grease, don't you dare. There's a small Ravkin fleet incoming, and by small I mean 33 ships and at least 1 gravity cannon. ETA, 90 seconds. Kyle stared at the ceiling. "I hate Tuesdays." The guard who'd spoken to Virelia stepped forward again. "You must take her. Protect her. She is more than you know. The Queen knew this day would come." "Oh, good," Kale said, scooping the child back into his arms and jogging toward Fortune's fluke. "She knew. Everyone always knows. I'm the only one who keeps getting surprised." The ship powered on as they boarded, its engines whirring with a sound that was either readiness or indigestion. Grease was already integrating external data, grumbling about corrupted firewall etiquette and offensive search histories in the Ravkin database. "Strap in," Cal called as the ship lifted. "Grease, punch it. I don't care where. Just away." As the hangar exploded behind them and the ship shot into space, Cal allowed himself a single breath of relief. Then Virelia looked at him and said, "You're in so much trouble." "Yeah," Kyle said, slumping into his chair. "You and me both, kid." Space, as it turned out, was less peaceful than Kale had hoped. Instead of silent stars and cool drinks, he got alarms, motion sickness, and a disembodied voice informing him that the rear stabilizers were critically offended by recent flight conditions. Virelia sat cross-legged in the co-pilot's chair, humming softly and playing with a loose wire she'd yanked from the control panel, which, according to Grease, was not critical. Kyle had his doubts. "You're absolutely sure," Kale asked for the 4th time, "that the glowing cable you're braiding like it's arts and crafts time isn't tied to the engine core?" She didn't look up. Grease said it just controls internal lighting and mood settings. And you trust Grease? No, she said brightly, but I like chaos. Right, forgot who I was dealing with. Cal ran a hand down his face and slumped back against the pilot's seat, eyes flicking to the stars streaking past. Remind me why I didn't just take a merc job on Calar Prime? Nice place. Beaches. No vampire fortresses. You dreamed about me, she said. Cal sighed. I walked into that one. Virelia swung her legs. Also, Calar Prime has jellyfish that eat bones. Fantastic. The ship lurched slightly, and Grease's voice crackled through the cockpit. Just a minor gravity echo. Residual effect from the jump. Kyle frowned. That's not supposed to happen, is it? Of course not. But you did punch through an ancient fortress, awaken a child with latent dimensional potential, and flee during a planetary eclipse. So, Tuesdays. Cal opened his mouth to respond but was cut off by an unexpected chime. Not the "we're being hunted" kind. More like a polite doorbell, which was somehow more unnerving. What is that? He asked warily. Grease paused. Someone's trying to hail us. In deep space? Yes. Who? Well, here's the thing, Grease began, with the tone of someone about to deliver very bad news as if it were a weather report. It's her. Kel's stomach did a very small, very specific flip. You're not being vague for effect, right? Nope. Confirmed. Queen Verastra, audio only. Signal contains encrypted emotion codes, so probably not a social call. Virelia perked up. Ooh, she's never called me during a chase before. Kyle jabbed the console. Fine, let's hear it. There was a crackle of static, then a voice poured into the cockpit, low, smooth, and undeniably ancient, each word brushing Kale's ears like a silk glove dipped in blood. You are brave, little warrior, and foolish. The child you hold is not meant for your world. She belongs to mine, to me. Kyle cleared his throat. Yeah, see, I have a bit of a policy about returning royalty that almost got me vaporized. Something about not doing that. You misunderstand, the voice cooed. I am not angry. I am intrigued. You walked into my sanctuary alone. You survived, and you took what was most precious to me. That's either love or a death wish. Kale felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Well, I do make questionable life choices. Virelia leaned toward the mic. Hi, Mom. I made a humming explosion. A pause, then, I noticed. Cal cut the transmission. Grease, block all further incoming. Nope, Grease said. Too late. She tagged the ship, tracked our jump vector. She's not chasing us. She's inviting us. To dinner? To the edge of the void rift. Kyle blinked. Is that where you eat dinner? Only if you're made of shadow and self-loathing. The void rift wasn't on any map Kale trusted. That was because it moved. It was a tear in space-time wrapped in magnetic storms and whispering radiation, and apparently it now came with table service. Kale leaned back in his chair, weighing options. They could run again, but she'd follow. Hide, but she'd find them. Or, we go, he said finally. Virelia beamed. Yay! Let's define yay, Kyle muttered. Approaching the void rift was like sailing into a nightmare wrapped in silk. The stars bent as they neared, spirals of light pulled into long, distorted lines. The ship groaned as if it could feel the wrongness of the place, hull shivering against the laws of physics. In the center of it all was a station, ancient, regal, and unmistakably Ravkan. Not a trap, Kale thought, but not a trap either. They docked. Kyle stepped out first, blades sheathed but ready, eyes scanning the dim hall lit by drifting lanterns that whispered and flickered. Virelia followed, hopping with excitement, utterly immune to the tension. A figure waited at the end of the corridor. She was tall, clad in obsidian armor that shimmered like oil, her eyes glowing with silver fire. Long ears curled back from her head like delicate horns. And when she stepped forward, Kale felt his pulse forget its rhythm. Queen Verastra, he said, not sure if he was supposed to bow, kneel, or run. She smiled. You look smaller in person. I usually do. Her eyes drifted to her daughter. You're safe. Good. Virelia grinned. He saved me from the spiky moss and made a loud noise when he hit a pipe with his head. Verastra's smile widened just a fraction. A warrior and a fool. I get that a lot, Cal replied. She stepped closer and he tensed, but instead of an attack, she placed a hand on his chest. You answered a call that was never sent. You came for her and for me. Cal blinked. That's oddly romantic for someone who just threatened my atoms. I never threatened. I promised. She leaned in, her voice a whisper. You don't know what you've started, human, but I do. Kyle swallowed. Do I at least get dinner before the cryptic prophecy? You get purpose, she said, stepping back. And if you survive, something more. He was still processing that when Virelia tugged his arm. Can I keep him? Kyle stared at her. Verastra considered. We'll see. Kyle groaned. Why do I feel like that was the least terrifying part of today? The first thing Cale noticed about the Queen's palace inside the Void Rift was that it smelled like ozone and wild lavender, as if someone had tried to mask the scent of old war crimes with spa treatments. The corridors pulsed with a low hum. Tech and magic twisted so tightly together that even Grease had gone silent in Cale's ear, which was saying something, because normally Grease didn't shut up unless rebooting or dead. Are the walls breathing? Kyle asked as a ripple ran down the length of a crimson hallway like it had just sighed. Virelia skipped ahead, entirely unconcerned. Only when they're listening. That's not comforting. She turned and grinned. Then you're listening right back. Great. Kyle added possibly sentient architecture to the growing list of things that made this palace a bad idea. Right between mysterious invitations and the Queen gently threatening to unmake his molecules while also flirting. They passed statues that blinked, doorways that shimmered between solid and spectral, and a floating bowl of fruit Cale swore hissed at him. He gave it a wide berth. Eventually they were led, though Cale never saw anyone actually guide them, to a chamber that looked like a meeting room designed by someone with a grudge against chairs. The only seating available was a levitating disc that pulsed ominously when Cale sat on it. Is this thing supposed to be vibrating like that? He muttered, shifting as the disc began spinning, very slowly, like it was trying to hypnotize him into compliance. It's reading your spine, Virelia said casually, hopping onto her own disc, which obediently lowered to her level and offered her what appeared to be a juice box. Kyle raised an eyebrow. What's it reading yours for? She sipped. I'm pre-approved. Before Cale could comment, the doors whispered open and the Queen entered again. Verastra moved like she didn't care whether gravity was involved. Her long ears twitched faintly as her eyes settled on him. You haven't run, she said. I didn't see the exit sign. You joke, she said, gliding closer. But you stayed. That is rare. Cal shrugged, trying not to fidget under her gaze. I figured if you were going to kill me, you'd have done it with more flair by now. Disintegration beam, psychic implosion, maybe a dramatic monologue first. Verastra's mouth curved slightly. Do you require a monologue? Not unless it comes with subtitles. She laughed, soft and unsettling, like glass cracking in slow motion. I called you here, she said, circling him, because you've done something no outsider ever has. You carried my daughter from a fortress of blood and shadows. You heard her call across dimensions, and you lived. Cale shifted. To be fair, barely. She chose you. I think she chose whoever could reach the control panel first. No, Verastra said, voice tightening. She chose you. Virelia from her disc. I like his eyebrows. They look like they argue with each other. See? Cale said, gesturing. Incredibly persuasive logic. Verastra stopped behind him. There is something you must understand. My people, the Ravkin, are not only bound by blood, we are bound by resonance. A kind of harmonic fingerprint of the soul. When we bond, it is not just emotional or biological. It is quantum, ancient. Final Kyle turned slowly. Is this some kind of proposal? Number, not yet. I like the not yet part least of all. Verastra smiled, a little sad now. You are not like the others. You were born of war, but you carry peace in your bones, like someone who's forgotten how to rest. Cal opened his mouth, then closed it again. Behind them, a panel blinked, and Grease's voice finally buzzed in again, strained. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I had to do a full systems cleanse. This place is crawling with empathic nanospirits. One of them tried to kiss my firewalls. Cal cleared his throat. Nanospirits? Think jellyfish with opinions. Don't touch anything glowing unless it asks nicely. Verastra turned her gaze toward the console. Ah, the ghost machine. Still speaking. I prefer charmingly persistent digital entity, Grease replied, with excellent taste in starship decor. She nodded politely. It will serve. Cal blinked. Wait, what will it serve? You. Us. Verastra's eyes flicked to Varelia. The cause. There was a long silence. I'd really love some context before I sign on to any causes, Kyle said finally. You know, just a little heads up on whether it ends with me saving a galaxy or being turned into an ornamental statue. Verastra walked to a crystalline console and pressed her palm to it. A projection bloomed into the air. Star systems shifting, glitching, darkening. One by one, sectors winked out, corrupted. This is the map of the rift front, she said. The border of what was once known space. Something old is waking beyond it. A hunger. It does not eat planets or suns. It eats meaning, history, memory, names. Kyle frowned. That sounds made up, Grease buzzed. I've got records of fragmentary signal collapses and AI integrity failures that match that pattern. Whole civilizations forgetting they existed mid-broadcast. Not fun stuff. Verastra looked at him. And the child you carry, the one you saved, is the only being we know of who can breach that veil. Who can remember through the forgetting? Because of you, her resonance has stabilized. Varelia waved. Ta-da! So let me get this straight, Kyle said. You're saying I'm the accidental chosen one in an interstellar memory war? Yes. And if I refuse, then we all forget, Kyle sighed. Well, I did want purpose. I just didn't expect it to come with so much existential dread. Varelia handed him the rest of her juice box. It helps. He took it, mostly for the gesture. It tasted like starlight and lemons. Somehow that figured. Well then, Cal muttered, let's save reality from collapsing into a narrative void, I guess. Verastra stepped closer, and this time when she touched his arm, it wasn't cold or commanding. It was steady. You'll find, she said softly, that the reward for risking everything is not survival. He looked at her. Then what is it? She smiled, slow and strange and entirely real. Belonging. Cal stood on the edge of the rift front, staring into what looked suspiciously like a cosmic screensaver gone rogue. Colors twisted in ways that mocked physics, stars folded in on themselves, and at the center of it all, a spiraling wound yawned open, pulsing like a heartbeat. He'd seen war, he'd seen death. But this was reality forgetting how to exist in real time. And yet somehow the part that unnerved him most was that Varelia had insisted they bring snacks. You think I'm joking, she said, munching on a cube of something green that hissed faintly with each bite. But last time we approached the rift, my glucose levels plummeted, and I had a full empathy crash. Collapsed. Wept for an hour. Hugged a lamp. Kyle winced. I feel like I should ask what kind of lamp. Ceramic, with a smiling beetle design. Very comforting. He gave a solemn nod. The best kind of lamp. Grease's voice buzzed into his ear. I've stabilized the drive bubble for now, but the temporal drift is increasing. If you start remembering things that didn't happen, or forget your own name, don't panic. That just means we're getting close. Comforting as always, Kyle muttered. From behind them, Verastra approached. She wore something that shimmered between armor and shadow, her eyes glowing faintly as if reflecting the chaos ahead. Kyle didn't need telepathy to sense she was tense, more than he'd ever seen her, and she was never tense. She was the embodiment of calculated calm, like a queen who'd practiced war and seduction in the same breath. This is as close as we dare take the ship, she said. Any further, and it will unravel. Unravel what? Kale asked. The hull? No, Grease chimed in. Us, like the crew, our sense of self, the actual thread that ties our identities to linear continuity. But hey, good luck. Cal exhaled slowly. How is it that every time I think we've hit the worst part, the universe just adds spice? Varastra stepped closer, holding out a small humming device. It resembled a compass that had a nervous breakdown. This is a memory tether. It'll anchor you to me, to this timeline. Kyle took it. And what happens if it fails? She smiled. Then you become a myth, or a vegetable. It varies. Varelia leaned in and whispered, I once saw a guy come back thinking he was a song. Just the chorus. It wasn't a great song either. Cal stared at the device. Okay, cool. Love this. Definitely not sweating through my boots right now. He pocketed the tether, stepped forward toward the edge of the launch bay, and took one last look at the warping void. So I just walk into it. Varastra nodded. You'll find the fragment. It's calling to you. The resonance will guide you. And the child's the key? She already opened the door. Virelia still chewing. And I made balloon animals with the door guardian. Kyle blinked. What does that mean? Don't worry, he was friendly until he wasn't, but now he is again. Probably. Kyle decided that pressing further would only unravel whatever shred of confidence he had left. He stepped forward, tether warm against his chest, and felt the moment the rift swallowed him. There was no transition, one blink, and the universe changed. He stood on a flat plane of endless mirrors, each reflecting different versions of himself. Some bore scars he didn't remember. One wore Ravkin armor. Another was missing half his face but looked content. Kyle instinctively reached for his blades, only to find one missing and the other turned to glass. Oh, come on, he muttered. A sound echoed across the mirrors. A laugh, low and familiar. Kyle turned slowly. A version of him stood a few paces away, taller, cleaner, dressed in shining military gear with medals that sparkled like gilt. Well, well, the other Cal said. The hero himself. Cal frowned. I don't like how smug my face looks when it's not attached to me. The other shrugged. Maybe if you embraced your potential, you'd get this confident. I'm plenty confident. I just use mine for sarcasm. They circled each other. You want the fragment, other Cal said. But fragments aren't given. They're earned. Cal sighed. If you're about to say, I have to defeat myself to find my true self, I swear I'm punching a mirror. The other grinned. Not quite. You just have to listen. Kyle narrowed his eyes. To what? In response, the mirrors began to sing. Not words, tones. A dissonant melody that wrapped around his skull and dug into the parts of him he kept locked away. Memories rose unbidden. The faces he'd let down, the battles he'd walked away from, the days he'd stared into empty skies and wondered what he was still fighting for. Varelia's voice cut through the noise. Kyle, hey, you're thinking too hard. That place feeds on guilt. Try remembering something dumb, like the time you got stuck in a trash chute. Kyle blinked, and then, suddenly, it was just him again. The mirrors shattered, the other faded, and in his palm lay a fragment of light, pulsing gently, shaped like a child's drawing of a star. Grease's voice returned, crackling. Anchor reestablished. You've got the piece. Get out before the rift tries to make you sing karaoke with your regret. Cal turned and walked back, the world folding around him, pulling him back into the real. He collapsed on the deck of the ship, sweating, heart pounding. Varastra was waiting. You held yourself together, she said. Kyle stared at her. Barely. That's more than most. Varelia hugged him. You smell like existential horror and burnt toast. Kyle managed a weak smile. That's my signature cologne. Varastra knelt beside him. One fragment down. 4 to go. He groaned. Do I at least get a snack before the next cosmic trauma? She reached into a pocket and handed him a second juice box. You've earned it. Kyle's left eye was twitching, and it wasn't because of space parasites this time. No, this was a psychological twitch, an existential one, brought on by the knowledge that he was about to walk into a sun, not metaphorically, not dramatically, literally. Walk into a star. I just want to take a moment, he said, adjusting the haptic regulator on his arm, to point out that I never trained for stellar insertion. My combat instructor was very clear. He said, "Kyle, if you ever find yourself walking into a sun, something has gone terribly wrong." Technically, Grease buzzed from the ship's neural relay, you're walking into the eye of a collapsed hypergiant nested inside a quantum fold. So not a sun, more like a bad idea wearing star makeup. Much better, Kyle said. Now I feel reassured. Virelia floated by upside down, piloting her small anti-grav disc as if it were a bored sea turtle. She was wearing sunglasses shaped like two screaming suns. Don't worry, Kyle. I've been into hot stars before. He raised a brow. That sounds like the start of a terrible romance novel. Chapter 1, she said in a deep voice. The heat was unbearable, but so was his smoldering gaze. Kyle groaned and tugged his suit tighter around the joints. This is how we die, joking into oblivion. No, Verostra said, stepping into the chamber with her usual quiet gravity. This is how we live. When facing entropy, humor is a protest. Laughter is defiance. Kyle blinked. Did you just quote a Ravkin war poet? She raised a brow. Number that was from the back of a cereal box I read on Andrella 7. Of course it was. The ship's loading bay doors peeled open, revealing the Heartfold, an astral phenomenon that looked less like a star and more like the galaxy had spilled its glitter drawer. Spirals of molten energy and fractured matter curved inward to an impossible point, and in the center floated a temple, or maybe a throne, or possibly a very judgmental space rock. It's the archive, Verostra said. A fragment is kept within, guarded. By what? Kyle asked. Memory made flesh. He squinted. Do you ever just say lasers like normal people? No. They move together, their suits forming a localized time dampener field that let them navigate the fold without turning into retroactively unborn infants. Cale decided not to think too hard about how that worked. The last time he asked Grease about time fields, he'd hallucinated his own birth and punched a chair. The surface of the archive was made of obsidian glass, reflecting stars that weren't there. As Cale stepped forward, one of the reflections moved without him. He froze. Is it supposed to do that? He whispered. No, Virelia said, but I'm sure it has its reasons. The reflections twisted, forming images. His crew from the Red Nadir, all standing around a fire, laughing. A memory, real, sharp, except he'd never been there. He blinked. Verostra placed a hand on his shoulder. This place reads your could-have-beens. It tempts. It tears. I already have enough regrets, Kyle muttered. The glass cracked under his next step, not breaking, just shifting, as if it approved. Then it emerged. Tall, humanoid, but built from starlight and unfinished thoughts. The creature shimmered with every step. It had no face, only a mirrored void, and Kel saw himself in it. Dozens of versions of himself, each flickering through decisions he'd never made. Behold, it intoned, voice like an echo that hadn't decided where it was going. The night of potential. Kel looked behind him. Wait, me? The creature tilted its head. You who carry both burden and blade, who dares fracture fate with humor, who resists despair with banter. You are kind of annoying, honestly. Kyle blinked. Wow, roasted by a cosmic reflection. That's new. Prove you are more than fragments, the being said, or be undone. Virelia leaned over to Verostra. Why do they always sound like retired drama teachers? Because they are. Verostra smirked. Cal stepped forward. Okay, reflection man. What's the test? Simple, the creature said. Choose. The space around them shattered like ice on fire. Suddenly, Cale stood in three places at once. In one, he was a general, leading an army of Ravkin and humans against the collapse. In another, he was a farmer, tending to strange alien vegetables with Virelia on a quiet moon. In the third, he was alone again, wandering ruins, no war, no love, just silence. Each life felt right. Each had a rhythm, a weight, a truth. Kyle staggered, mind splitting, heart racing. What is this? He gasped. Resonance, Verostra's voice echoed faintly. These are all real, paths not taken. But only one leads forward, Grease chimed in. Pro tip, if you see me wearing a sombrero in any of them, choose that one. Cal's hands trembled. He reached out, felt the warmth of the farming life. Peace. Then touched the fire of command, purpose, glory. Finally, the solitude, the cold comfort of survival. He stepped back. I choose none, he said. The creature paused. Explain. Cal straightened. Those aren't my choices. Not anymore. I'm not here to escape or dominate or disappear. I'm here because a child called me, because someone believed I was worth risking it all. That's my truth. The creature flickered. You refuse to be defined. I already am, Cal said, by the people I protect. There was silence. Then the light dimmed, the reflections faded, and in the creature's chest a new fragment pulsed, brighter than before. It extended its hand, and Cal took it. Continue, it whispered, and do not forget the sombrero. Cal blinked. Did that thing just joke? Maybe it's learning, Virelia said. They returned to the ship in silence, the second fragment secured. Cal sat back in the medbay, sipping nutrient paste. I hate memory tests, he muttered. Verastra sat beside him. You passed. I winged it. That's all life ever is. Kyle closed his eyes and faintly smiled. Kyle awoke to the sound of someone humming off key and the unmistakable scent of sizzling ion bacon. His eyelids lifted slowly. The ceiling above him was no longer flickering with dimensional distortion, which was an improvement. The medbay felt calm, almost normal, if you ignored the soft chittering of Virelia's pet mimic rat chewing through what may or may not have been Grease's favorite calibrator. He sat up. The scars along his shoulder, glowing faintly from the last encounter with the Echo Core, had faded to a soft shimmer. A good sign, probably. Though in fairness, his sense of what counted as good had grown suspiciously flexible over the course of this mission. Look who's alive, Virelia chirped from the corner, wearing a bathrobe that read, Queen of Nebulae, and flipping synthetic pancakes with telekinesis. Grease bet you'd be unconscious for another 12 hours. I said you'd wake up when your stomach did. My stomach is a prophet, Kyle muttered. Verastra entered the room, silent as always, a data pad tucked under one arm. She looked different. Not in any visible way, not in her long raven hair or the usual sharp gleam of her eyes, but in posture, in presence, like she'd finally exhaled after holding her breath for years. We have everything, she said simply. Kyle rubbed his eyes. All 5 fragments? Verastra nodded. Restored, integrated. The child is whole again. And where is she? Sleeping, peacefully, for the first time since her mind was split. Her gaze softened. You did more than survive this. You helped her reclaim herself. He swung his legs off the bed, flexed his fingers. So what now? Parade? Medals? A galactic festival with awkward dancing? Close, Virelia said, flipping a pancake onto a ceiling panel where it hovered politely. We're going to meet the Queen. Kyle paused. Oh, that Queen. Verastra gave a ghost of a smirk. She's requested, no, commanded an audience. He stood, joints cracking. If she kisses me again in front of a crowd, I'm going to need hazard pay. Virelia shrugged. Depends. Tongue or no tongue? Do not answer that, Kyle said, and left the medbay before the joke could finish forming. The Queen's throne room was less a room and more a living cathedral of crystal and pulse-reactive flora. Light moved when you did. The walls whispered in languages Kyle didn't know, though one of them might have been a particularly judgmental form of musical notation. At the far end, the Queen stood, not seated, not lounging, just standing, poised and regal, wearing a gown made from threads of liquefied shadow. Her ears were long, graceful arcs above her flowing black hair. Her eyes were twin galaxies, and when they met his, he forgot for a moment that she'd nearly incinerated him the last time they were this close. You kept your word, she said, voice like rain on metal. You brought her back. Cal inclined his head. Turns out I'm good at returning royalty. Might start a side business. The Queen raised a brow. You mocked to deflect. And to charm, he added with a smile. She walked closer, each step humming with subtle gravity. You risked annihilation. You walked through memory and mirror and entropy. For someone you barely knew. He shrugged. That's what I do. Save people. Fight monsters, collect emotional baggage. Then take your reward. He blinked. Is it more juice boxes? She stepped within arm's reach and placed a hand on his chest. The contact was cool, not cold. Grounding. Number, you've earned a choice. Stay and serve as protector to our child and to me. Not as a prisoner nor a consort, but as one who is chosen. Kale's breath hitched. And if I don't, I let you go. No war, no blood. You've earned your peace. Kale of Earth. He looked past her, saw the child, no longer wild-eyed and fractured, but calm, drawing shapes in the air with her fingers. She smiled at him. Behind him, Virelia whispered, if you say no, I'll understand. But if you say yes, I want a room with a view and access to the royal fridge. Verostra said nothing. She already knew the answer. Kyle turned back to the queen. You want someone to protect her, to protect you, not because you're weak, but because you're tired of doing it alone. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He took her hand. Then I stay, but on one condition. She tilted her head. Name it. No capes. Capes are a tripping hazard. A rare, genuine laugh slipped from her lips. Agreed. Time passed, but not as before. Kale no longer lived by mission briefings or galactic crisis. He sparred with palace guards who thought swords were outdated. He taught the child to throw a punch in a pun. He argued with Virelia about the correct number of marshmallows in hot synth chocolate. One night he sat with Verostra under a hanging sky where stars sang lullabies. She looked at him and said, "You're different now." "So are you," he replied. They didn't need to say more. Even Grease softened, eventually growing fond of the mimic rat, though he denied it with passionate, poorly constructed insults. And the queen? She stood beside him, not as ruler and subject, but as equals. Two souls stitched by fate, bound by something stranger than destiny. Trust. Kale still carried his blades. He still had scars. But now when he looked in the mirror, he saw more than a fighter. He saw a man who had answered a call no one else could hear, and was better for it. The stars turned, the galaxy breathed, and for once Kale didn't feel like he was just passing through it. He belonged. The end.